Hey everyone, welcome to this explainer. I am so thrilled to have you here today because we are unpacking a truly mind-bending reality about the global economy. Listen to this. Every single country on Earth is currently sitting on massive amounts of debt. And I'm not just talking about struggling economies, right? I mean, absolute export powerhouses like Germany, oil-rich nations like Saudi Arabia, and global financial titans. They all owe just enormous sums of money. Okay, let's dive right into this. $315 trillion. It's a number almost too large to even comprehend, but that is the total amount of global debt today. To put that massive scale into perspective for you, it's nearly 3 times the size of the entire global economy. Think about that. And the craziest part? It isn't slowing down. Global borrowing increases by the equivalent of $1 trillion every 100 days.
When we break this down among the heaviest hitters, the numbers are just staggering. The United States currently owes $38 trillion, which is the highest figure in its history. The European Union carries around $14 trillion, and Japan sits at almost $9 trillion. But as you hear these numbers, I want you to kind of shift your perspective. Because debt at this level, it isn't just a burden or, a red mark on a ledger. It is actually the invisible scaffolding of the modern world.
Which brings us to the real central mystery of this explainer. If everybody owes money, who exactly is owed, right? It's a fascinating puzzle. I mean, if every country is a debtor, where is the ultimate creditor? Well, if you follow the chain of IOUs long enough, you discover something kind of unsettling but absolutely true. The world doesn't owe money to anyone in particular. It actually just owes money to itself. Let's move to the timeline and see how this built up historically. Centuries before digital transfers, national debt was really born in war. Back in 1694, England was fighting France and running completely out of gold. So the king turned to merchants, trading future tax-backed interest payments for immediate funding, and the Bank of England was created to manage it. Suddenly, the government's promise became a tradable asset. France and the Netherlands quickly copied and refined the system, and the US adopted it later for the revolution. The ability to borrow suddenly meant the ability to rule. And that historical shift is perfectly captured by this idea. The battlefield became the balance sheet. Empires that once conquered territory purely to extract physical gold pivoted entirely. Instead, they began issuing bonds to extract interest. National debt literally stopped being viewed as a mark of failure and transformed into the ultimate measure of a nation's credibility. Section 1. The Mirror. Unmasking the true creditors. Let's transition back to the present day to look at the United States and its massive $38 trillion debt, just to uncover exactly who holds the other end of that rope. Now, what's really interesting about this is it completely shatters a very common myth. When people say the US is hopelessly in debt to China, well, actually, China holds only about 2% of the total, which is roughly $800 billion. Japan holds 7%, but the vast, overwhelming majority, 66% of it, is held domestically. We're talking American banks, mutual funds, pension funds, and the Federal Reserve. America owes most of its debt to America. This creates what we call the circular mirror. It works like this. The US Treasury issues bonds. Banks and funds buy them. The Federal Reserve often buys them back, literally creating new dollars in the process. Then Americans pay taxes that fund the interest on those very same bonds, which flows right back into their own retirement accounts. The debt is entirely real, for sure, but the creditor is mostly just a reflection of the domestic system itself. But this circularity isn't just an American thing. It's a planetary game of hot potato. Japan lends to the US through treasuries. The US lends to Europe through the International Monetary Fund. Europe lends to developing nations via the World Bank. And then those developing nations take their foreign exchange reserves and lend right back to advanced economies. It's exactly like a poker table where every single player has borrowed chips from the person sitting next to them, secured completely by a continuous loop of promises where nobody ever stands up. And the dealer at this poker table? The central banks. They are the ultimate market maker. They don't merely manage debt, they manufacture it. See, whenever a central bank buys government bonds, it creates new money in exchange. Every digital dollar or physical bill in your wallet represents a unit of debt somewhere else. There is an IOU invisibly engraved on every single dollar in circulation, backed by this massive, complex web of hedge funds and central banks. Section 2. The refinancing illusion.
This leads us to arguably the most crucial paradigm shift today. If you truly want to understand sovereign debt in the 21st century, you basically have to unlearn everything you know about personal finance. If you or I take out a loan, household debt, we are strictly expected to repay the principal amount. But governments operate under sovereign debt rules. They treat debt like a rolling subscription. They don't actually plan to pay it off. Not now, not ever. Instead, they use a process called refinancing, where they just constantly issue new bonds to pay off the old ones.
Need proof? Look at Japan. Japan has been rolling over its debt for decades. Its national debt now exceeds an unbelievable 250% of its gross domestic product. 250%. Yet, its government bond yields, the interest rates it has to pay out, remain near zero. Why? Because the investors holding that debt aren't waiting to be repaid. They are simply waiting to renew the deal. So this brings up a really provocative question. What happens if a government actually pays off all its debt? We hear politicians talk about balancing the budget or clearing that $38 trillion balance all the time. But doing so is actually selling an illusion. And ironically, following through on that promise would essentially destroy modern capitalism. Let me show you why. If the US paid off its debt tomorrow, pension funds and banks would instantly lose their safest collateral, the foundational assets they use to secure all their other trades. The global dollar supply would shrink dramatically. That would trigger rapid deflation across all markets, culminating in a global economic collapse. And this brilliantly illustrates that a US Treasury bond is not a liability to the market. It's the foundational asset. Government debt is literally the heartbeat of the global economy. To quote our source material, the system is like a shark that must keep swimming to breathe. The financial machine doesn't run on repayment. It runs entirely on confidence and the rhythmic issuance of new debt. It's a closed loop of trust. As long as investors believe governments will keep paying the interest, those numbers can stretch indefinitely. Section 3. The House of Cards. When confidence breaks. But what happens when that vital ingredient of trust simply evaporates? Because while the math can stretch indefinitely, human belief definitely has its limits. History gives us stark reminders of what happens when the music stops. Look at Greece in 2010. Bondholders panicked, yield spiked, and it led to severe austerity and mass unemployment. Or Argentina's repeated defaults, turning debt into a recurring national curse. Or Sri Lanka, where the sheer inability to service loans literally collapsed the political system. When belief fades, the anonymous creditors holding nations by the throat suddenly step out of the shadows. And there is a mathematical reality to this system that we really have to acknowledge neutrally here. Debt is ultimately a transfer between classes, not just countries. The interest payments flow upward from taxpayers and workers directly to the institutions and investors holding the debt. This mechanism helps explain why global inequality and global indebtedness tend to rise together. The system inherently rewards the owners of debt over the payers of debts. So, the crucial point to take away from all of this is that the modern financial system has fundamentally turned debt itself into money. Governments issue it, banks multiply it, investors trade it, and we all depend on it. The line between debtor and creditor is completely blurred. Debt once meant bondage. Today, it means balance. I want to leave you with this final, powerful thought from our sources. But if that balance ever tips, if confidence breaks, the illusion ends, and we'll remember what debt really is, a promise that can't be kept forever. It makes you look at the global economy in a completely different light, doesn't it? If this explainer gave you a new perspective on the invisible forces shaping our world, be sure to subscribe to explore more fascinating financial history with us. Thank you so much for learning with me today.